I think there can be a disconnect between the commentary and the reality.
I don't agree with that. I think people are indispensable.
This is Unlawful. Welcome to Unlawful. As always, I'm Brandon Renken, and with me today is Gail Cummings. Good afternoon, Gail.
Good afternoon, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
So, Gail, I don't know you at all. So tell me, what's your story? What do you do?
So my story is that I am a business lawyer turned psychotherapist and executive coach. And I practiced law for about 17 years and kind of hit the wall. I was not that happy. I liked practicing law, but there was something about the nature of it that just wasn't sitting right with me. And I'd always been a student of human behavior. I'd been a psychology major in college. And I found that my clients were sharing with me about their personal lives as well as their legal problems. And I just thought, I really always wanted to do psychology. I think I need to jump ship and go back.
First question is, did you ever figure out what it was? What the nature thing was that was really the hardest for you?
About being a lawyer?
Yeah. You said there was something about the nature of it that wasn't giving you fulfillment or making you happy, or that was making you unhappy. And I'm always curious if people are ever able to identify the thing.
Thinking back to it, I think I know what it was. I'm very extroverted. I love people. People have always been my passion. That's just always how it's been. And I found myself alone a lot. I was researching, I was writing. Yeah, I was in meetings, but I was still young enough that I wasn't really talking. And that's okay. I don't have a problem listening, but it was hard. It was hard. And I really value relationship and interaction. And I think I felt like I wasn't getting that. Law was also shifting enough that it had become very much of a business. It had gone from what I would say was a profession to a business. And the productivity and hours billed, all the things I don't have to tell you, the realization rates from clients were foremost. They were the part.
When was that? Like what year?
So I left law in 2000.
Okay. It's always interesting to talk to people at who practice law at different phases, because when I started practicing in 2006, I graduated law school and started in 2006. For me, that's the good old days, right? And now is the moment where it's really becoming a business, right? And for you, that had already happened.
I think there's an evolution,
Sure,
Brandon, and I think that it has evolved. And it was the first time, pretty much in the history of law, where partners were asked to leave, or their salaries were cut, their laws were cut, and eventually they left. That had never happened. And
it's funny because there are certain areas that there's like this pendulum swing, right? Like ever since, it's interesting because every time I hear a complaint, either from a senior lawyer or a junior lawyer or any level of lawyer, I'm confident that I've been around long enough to have heard the exact opposite complaint from people in the exact same position. So like when I started, one of the big things was more transparency with respect to bonuses. Like we want to know that if we hit 2,100 hours or 1,800 hours, we're going to get X amount of more money, right? And then that became a problem because certain people would say, wait a minute, like I did less hours, but I did better work, right? So I want less rigidity and more, more flexibility in that process. And that's one of the pendulums that swung back and forth. I joke about this all the time because I also think that the over politicization of the business is a problem. When I started, the rules were get your hours, earn your revenue, do what you have to do. But nobody ever talked of, hey, you have to be in your office from 9 to 5. It was always like one of the great things about having to bill 15 to 20 hours a day was you could pick whichever 4 not to bill, right? Or you could do them at home, or you could do it. There was flexibility, right? I always joked about how I feel like I'm working all the time, but my wife, who's a teacher, if she wanted to do something on a Tuesday at noon, no chance.
Oh, she can't, right?
You can't, right? But I always had the flexibility to do that, right? And obviously with in-office days and hybrid workspaces and all of that, I think that the crystallization of some of those policies, and I've said that on this podcast or this project a bunch of times, I think the crystallization of policies over trust and respect causes as much bad as good, right? There are upsides and downsides to both versions of it. And I don't think that the people who are advocating for one or the other ever think enough about the downsides of what they're advocating for.
Well, I think lawyers by nature as advocates, right? That's our training. I think we have the ability, particularly once we're out of law school and we no longer have to switch sides.
Sure.
We don't switch sides. So we're making the argument, we're advocating, and we're all in. We are locked in. And so I think it doesn't allow for the understanding or the conversation of the other side. I think every lawyer, if they thought about it, would be able to argue the other side.
Yeah.
I don't think they think about doing that.
I also think that, and this is something that's happened outside of the legal field too, I think that we also go into every conversation with a certain amount of assumptions of what the other person's biases are, right? If you're over 50, right, and a partner or an equity partner as opposed to a non-equity partner, or an associate as opposed to a counsel, or a young associate, or a law student as opposed to an associate, all of those things, we assume that there are biases in favor of one thing or the other, right? The more institutionalized you are, the more part of the machine you are, the less you value the individual, right? I think that's come, to your point, I think that's come from banking and private equity and has infected the legal practice and continues to do so. But I also think that some of that generalization comes from commentary on the legal profession, right? I think that there are certain things we do as lawyers, even in big law firms. I work at big law, right? Even in big law firms, I think that there are certain things that we do that take so much care and accountability that we can't play the stats game, right? Like, especially when you put outcomes in the hands of other people, which we were talking about Stoic philosophy earlier. I think outcomes are always in the hands of other people. But when you put it to the judge or the jury, right, you lose every aspect of control. And with that, you can lose based on any idiosyncrasy that exists. And as a result, accountability is important, but blame shouldn't be, right? And sometimes I think there's a disconnect between the army of people commenting on what it means to be a lawyer and what you should be thinking when you're a lawyer and what you should care about, i.e., you're just a cog in a wheel. So if somewhere's going to pay you 10% more, go there, like that kind of thing. I think there can be a disconnect between the commentary and the reality.
I don't agree with that. I think people are indispensable.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Right. I think you're making my point exactly. Because despite the fact, not only do I think that people are indispensable, I think that people at law firms understand that their people and their teammates are indispensable. And I don't think you see a lot of that in the commentary on the modern legal workplace.
Exactly. I think we get a bad rap as lawyers, and I think law firms and legal positions get a bad rap. I think anyone who's not really inside, and maybe the people who write about that have sour grapes. To your point, when we started our conversation about being very negative.
Right.
And something that I find interesting from the world of human behavior is that for every negative comment, you need to balance it out with 5 positive comments. It's the way our brains work.
Sure. Because
of our survival mechanism. Those of us who are healthy and cognitively healthy, we scan the universe for negative. It's how we survive.
Yep.
We don't take in the positive.
Yeah, it's funny because my mom used to say that to me. My mom would say, why is it that you always remember the bad stuff? And I didn't understand it when I was a kid, but now my daughter remembers all the broken promises and none of the kept ones, right? And what makes that even more problematic, and this is kind of what I was referring to, what makes that even more problematic is that the easiest way to create content is to create negative content.